I more announcement. Joe Burnham has an announcement.
Thank you, Lori.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Okay. Good morning.
Good morning.
First of all, I would like to thank everyone who donates to Don't Forget to Feed Me on a monthly basis. You guys are all amazing, and we applaud you. Many of you are regulars, and we and the pets and owners who ultimately receive the food appreciate you more than you know. Don't Forget to Feed Me's large annual fundraiser is coming up in April. Each year, they hold the Hungry Hound Hustle. I'm wearing last year's t-shirt, which is a 5K fun and 1K dog walk. You can bring your puppies with you. In addition to inviting everyone to participate, of course, we also want to take this opportunity for all of you to represent all peoples, formerly First Jefferson. We will be using our Don't Forget to Feed Me funds for February and March to secure a sponsorship for the race. This will be a great chance to represent ourselves to a large group of Fort Worth pet owners, as are many of you guys as well. The date is April the 22nd, and we are looking for volunteers of any age to staff our table and invite and inform the masses to visit us here at All Peoples. The event does not last all day, so it won't take a huge time requirement. And the more of you that help out, the less time each of you will have to spend. So let's go bravely out into the public once again and tell people about this special place called All Peoples Unitarian Universalist Church. Please see me or Carl if you would like to help. And today is collection day, so if anybody would like to give towards the Don't Forget to Feed Me fund, every dollar counts and every dollar helps. And thank you so much for your time.
Don't Forget to Feed Me is a nonprofit that's really close to my heart. Back in my undergrad, a friend of mine and I ran for homecoming king and queen, and we were both extremely non-traditional. I was older and he was gay, and there were many jokes, but we ran under the premise of every vote that anyone made for whoever was running, we would raise $1 for each vote for Don't Forget to Feed Me. And in fact, in my Facebook memories today, the picture came up of us presenting a check for $342 to Don't Forget to Feed Me. Yeah. It was the most fun I've ever had in my life. And we didn't win. We won a different way, yes. Let us center our minds and our hearts as we call ourselves to worship. In the midst of a world where people hunger and thirst, come be the divine who feeds the hungry. In the midst of a world where people are abused and oppressed, come be the divine who calls for compassion and justice. In the midst of a world filled with wars and rumors of war, come be the divine who desires nothing less than peace for the world. In the midst of a world of spiritual emptiness, come be the divine who gives life meaning. Come be the divine whose grace and love know no end.
For our chalice lighting, opening hymn, and spoken affirmation. May we be reminded here of our highest aspirations and inspired to bring our gifts of love and service to the altar of humanity. May we know once again that we are not isolated beings, but connected in mystery and miracle to the universe, to this community, and to each other. Please join in singing our opening hymn, number 298, Wake Now My Senses.
We
Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest of truth is our sacrament, and service is our prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge and freedom, to serve others in community, to the end that all souls shall grow into harmony with creation. Thus do we covenant with one another. You can sit.
Would the children like to come forward, and anyone else who would like to come forward with them? Oh, thank you for sitting up here with me. Sometimes it's just fun to sit on the steps. And Ashley, the person who ran with me for Homecoming King, Shelby Noland. Yes. We've been partners in crime for a long time now. So, why do you think it's important to let others know that they can be safe with you, that they can be themselves with you?
Because if we tell them that they can be safe with us, they will trust us. That can make a new relationship.
Absolutely, absolutely. So it's really, really important that in everything we do, that we make sure that we are saying that to other people and showing that to other people. Because sometimes a place can be a safe place, but you don't know it is, right? Until someone tells you or shows you. So, do you want to take the lid off this? Ah! All right, I really tried to do all of them because I wanted them all to fly out, but I can't hold them and spin them at the same time. So there's a whole bunch of these in here. Does everybody want to spin one? I have lots, so if anybody wants to play with these after service, they're welcome to. So we know that butterflies are all different from each other, and yet they are all so beautiful. I don't know, let me see if I can. Ooh. There it goes, it went right behind you. That'll never happen again. But it's important that we, you did it. So it's important that we let people know that they can be themselves and that they're safe with us no matter who they are or what they look like or what they believe in, that they are safe to be with us. So I have these buttons, and they're like affirmations. So I want you to pass it around and pick a button. And if you want to pick a button for your friends as well, you're welcome to. There's plenty. Okay. I also have these pens. And would you like to read what it says on that pen? Let everybody know what it says.
You are safe with me. That's what
and I want everybody to take one of those because I want us to be sure and let everyone we come in contact with know that they can be who they are and that is safe with us. So I brought something I want to read to you. It's called Be Yourself. The world would like to change you. There are pressures all around. You must decide just who you are, then firmly hold your ground. You have an image of yourself, an ideal sense of you, and to this vision you must always struggle to be true. You know what you are good at, and you know where talents lie. But if you're ruled by others, your uniqueness could pass you by. Remember, there is much to learn, but all new things aren't good. Wisdom lies in what you've learned and what you have withstood. So be yourself and don't allow the world to take control. Preserving your identity is life's most precious goal. Make sure that any of you who would like a butterfly can come up and get one. There's plenty, and I'm going to leave the buttons up here too, because we all need to make sure that we let other people know that they're safe with us, okay? You can pass those around if you want. Thank you for coming down here this morning. Ooh, that one's exceptionally pretty, isn't it?
For the gifts which we receive and the gifts which we ourselves are, may we be truly grateful. May we be committed to using these gifts to make a difference in the world, to increase love and justice, to decrease hate and oppression, to expand beloved community, to share and to keep sharing. Your contributions will benefit the missions of our church and also as an outreach to the larger community. We share the undesignated cash offerings in the collection plate as a part of our Share the Plate program. Our designated recipient this month is the Center for Transforming Lives, a Fort Worth agency working with women and children to disrupt the cycle of poverty. The offering will now be gratefully received. Will the ushers please come forward?
reading this morning is from Just Have More Faith: How Bad Theology Hurts the Suffering by Vinitha Rendell Risner. Why does God answer yes to some prayers and no to others? Why does God miraculously heal some people and not others? Why does disaster strike one city and not another? I've been pondering these questions since Hurricane Florence devastated much of eastern North Carolina last year. I live in the center of the state, and contrary to the foreboding predictions, we were relatively unaffected. In response, a friend said, "I know why we were spared catastrophe and the storm circled our area and went south. I was praying that God would keep us safe, and He answered my prayers." I had no words. My friend's words made me wonder if she thought that no one in Eastern Carolina was praying. I know people whose livelihoods were destroyed in the storm. Everything they owned was gone. They escaped with their lives, but nothing material was left. Some of them begged God to spare their city. What are we as believers to infer from these natural disasters? Can we simply draw straight lines between our requests and God's answers? Years ago, I heard a pastor tell of his cancer that went into remission. When he told his congregation the good news, several commented, "We knew God would heal you. He had to. So many people were praying for you." While the pastor was thankful for others' prayers, he also knew God did not owe him healing. Faithful believers throughout the ages have earnestly prayed and yet not been healed. And then there was my own son, Paul, who died as an infant. We had prayed, fasted, and asked friends to pray for his healing. Several years after his death, we met a man who said, when he learned of our loss, "Don't take this wrong, but we prayed for all of our children before they were born, and they were all born healthy." We had no words. I have often been discouraged that others have been rescued while I was still suffering. Prosperity gospel proponents have told me that if I had prayed in faith, my body would have been healed, my son would have been spared, and my marriage would have been restored. It was all up to me. If I just had the faith, I would have had a better outcome. Their words have left me bruised and disillusioned, wondering what I was doing wrong.
We will now sing our middle hymn, number 159, "This Is My Song."
This
We honor our time together with the shared stories and news from the congregation. Each week, there is a journal outside the entrance to the sanctuary where you can write a message of memory or hope. Also, at any time during our service, you are welcome to come forward and light a candle in our meditation center here at the side of our chancel. We are also reminded of the many people in the world who are burdened by sickness, hunger, and pain, by sorrow and anxiety, by violence and loss. We pause this morning to share our concern and care for these people, as well as for those closer to home about whom we are concerned. From our Book of Memory and Hope, we include lifting up President Jimmy Carter as he begins his transition from this human life. May his family rejoice in his life of service to the least of these. May the light and warmth of this community extend to all who are rejoicing or hurting in our wider world. The stories that live in this community are cherished as we keep one another in mind during the coming week. Please now settle comfortably and pause for a few moments of quiet meditation to hold and uplift the sorrows and celebrations, both spoken and unspoken among us, and then Misha will lift our hearts with music.
Thank you for that beautiful music. A young teenager dying of cancer confesses that he hates God and tells everyone to stop praying for him because it doesn't mean anything. What kind of God thinks it's okay to keep me in agony while I wait to die? A man posts on social media that his son-in-law was in a terrible car wreck, but will pull through because God put angels in the car to protect him. He still wants your prayers, though, just in case. The transgender man, thinking he has found an accepting church family, is suddenly confronted by a person saying he is an abomination and offensive to God. The King Singers were to perform at Pensacola Christian College, but the concert was canceled by the college because of lifestyle concerns regarding the sexuality of members of the group. We can't knowingly do anything to violate Scripture, they said. After delivering books and classroom supplies to an elementary school, a church member screams at his own minister that he is a murderous baby killer in his response to last Sunday's sermon about choice. Dak Prescott, a person of faith whose infinite service to his community was met with loud jeers as he was presented an award for his commitment to serving others. He gets us. A message from the evangelical church whose hate and harm-filled theological malpractice has caused so much damage that it needs to rebrand Christianity to stop the hemorrhage of people leaving the church. A rebranding that does not change the harmful theology that brought them to this place. Fundamentalist anything that creates a Christianity police inside our heads who decide what behaviors make us worthy and unworthy. In the case of the teen who was dying of cancer, his teacher instructed the other students to pray for a miracle. The teacher said, "I believe in miracles." Their teacher planted that idea when she told 30 13-year-olds about their classmates' cancer. One of the children was quoted as saying, "If everybody prays for him, God will listen." He died some months later, and when I shared this story with the educators and counselors in my professional network, there was heated discussion about the teacher's decision to use prayer as a coping strategy for her students. We wondered how the parents of those children dealt with the inevitable question, why didn't God listen? Events like this create fertile ground for conflict between religious belief and reality. Not only did those children have to grieve the loss of their friend, they were also prompted by the teacher's insistence on prayer to grapple with complex theological questions. In a similar scenario, while facilitating a grief group for adolescents at the Warm Place, I overheard this conversation between two boys who had recently lost their fathers. One said, "I don't understand how anybody could go to heaven. There are too many rules. My dad didn't believe in God, so does that mean he doesn't get to go to heaven?" The other responded, "Well, God forgives everybody, right? So I guess everybody gets to go to heaven?" Another boy in the same group told the story of his mother taking her own life. He'd heard that suicide was a sin and worried about where she would spend eternity. One of my seminary professors, the Reverend Dr. Steve Sprinkle, reminds us that many of the toxic religious beliefs we recognize today are rooted in the Abrahamic faith traditions. He identifies some of the key features of those beliefs. They include forms of emotional, spiritual, moral, and sometimes physical or sexual violence and power abuse. They compromise emotional mental health and are connected to mental emotional dysfunction. They exist on a spectrum of intensity ranging from unhealthy to harmful to lethal. He stresses the importance of identifying and understanding this theological malpractice that can distort our perception of what it means to care for and value one another. And although the examples given above do not constitute abuse or necessarily lead to mental dysfunction, they could certainly characterize the unhealthy end of this spectrum, depending upon how the children's questions were answered by their families, churches, or communities. If one boy's evangelical grandmother insisted that his father didn't go to heaven because he wasn't saved, or if someone told the other boy that his mother went to hell for suicide, the seeds of toxic theology would be firmly planted. Father Matthew Fox spent 34 years in the Catholic Dominican order before being expelled for questioning the doctrine of original sin. Today, he is a leading voice in a movement for making Christianity more progressive, more inclusive, and more relevant to contemporary life. Fox suggests that we replace the idea of original sin with a more life-affirming, less threatening concept called original blessing. He poses a profound question. How is religion to be an agent of transformation if religion itself is not transformed? Religious traditions can be toxic when they place allegiances to beliefs and doctrines above personal spiritual experience. Many of today's theologians are questioning those beliefs and doctrines, and their responses seem to point to two distinct schools of thought. On one side, traditional Christians struggle to make sense of doctrines, while on the other, doctrines are rejected entirely to make room for a new form of Christianity. In his book, Love, Violence, and the Cross, Dr. Gregory Love critiques the doctrine of substitutionary atonement, while at the same time lamenting its loss from contemporary Christianity. He states, "Today the Christian church is losing this center, and with it the good news that the end of divine human estrangement has been accomplished in the work of Jesus." He identifies this work as the central Christian assertion, but also points out its many flaws, including how the theory of substitutionary atonement justifies abuse and violence by glorifying the suffering of the innocent. He grapples heavily with this doctrine in a precarious balancing act in which he attempts to remain faithful to the teachings of the church while questioning the validity of its central assertion. Pastor and media personality Rob Bell also takes aim at major teachings, in particular, the notion of eternal damnation in hell and the image of God as a cruel punisher. In his book, Love Wins, he points out that the concept of hell in the afterlife is not biblical, and also says that the image of God as a violent taskmaster is psychologically crushing. But despite his willingness to deconstruct these beliefs, he still maintains that Jesus is the only path to God. He tells us that because Jesus is one with God, we can be one with God too by going through Jesus as a conduit. In Bell's words, this will allow God to rescue us from death, sin, and destruction. Now, although they both attempt to offer a critical analysis, Bell and Love end up bringing us right back to where we started. A theology that characterizes humanity as innately flawed and in need of rescue. Dr. Love validates this view when he says, God could quite justly have abandoned us to our fate. He could have left us alone to reap the fruit of our wrongdoing and to perish in our sins. It is what we deserved. But he did not. Because he loved us, he came after us in Christ. He pursued us even to the desolate anguish of the cross, where he bore our sin, guilt, judgment, and death. Bell and Love are both passionate about the dangers of doctrines like eternal damnation and substitutionary atonement, but they are still referring to a humanized image of God as a father figure who acts either as a loving rescuer or a cruel judge. This is not an image that supports progressive theology. Trying to match doctrine and dogma with lived human experience is like trying to put a square peg into a round hole. The square peg is belief in divine reward and punishment. The round hole is the way life actually works. By the time most of us are young adults, we have observed that good people are not necessarily rewarded and bad are not necessarily punished. Real human experience proves that it just doesn't work that way. So the only way the emerging church could sell the idea of divine reward or punishment was to locate it in the afterlife, where it could not be verified or validated. Matthew Fox describes our current understanding of Christianity as a religious tradition that begins with sin and centers almost exclusively around redemption from sin. A good deal of this tradition can be attributed to Jonathan Edwards' notorious 18th century sermon, Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God, which depicts humanity as abhorred by God, dangling over glowing flames in the pits of hell, and worthy of nothing more than to be cast into the fire. Fox proposes a more positive understanding of sin by defining it as any action that causes harm to creation and disrupts harmony. He offers a reasonable alternative to the idea of salvation. Instead of striving for an unattainable perfection and dividing the world into saved versus unsaved, we can rise to the understanding that all experience is holy. And we can see God's presence as much in suffering as we can in joy. We can learn to view ourselves as part of an original blessing rather than an original sin. The blessing is our ability to learn and grow, our free will, our expanding awareness, our curiosity about the meaning of our existence, and our eagerness to embark on a spiritual quest, the very things Adam and Eve were punished for. Imagine how different our spiritual lives would be if we saw Adam and Eve's burgeoning self-awareness as a step in the evolution of human consciousness rather than an error or an act of disobedience. Instead of wrestling endlessly with doctrines and notions that are difficult to understand and even more difficult to apply to daily living, why not start by rejecting those notions entirely? Episcopal Bishop John Shelby Spong does not hesitate to insist that the idea of Jesus dying for your sins has to go. He explains that seeing Jesus as a rescuer is a form of magical thinking that allows the church to make guilt a necessary step towards conversion. Spong suggests that moving theism aside would free us to explore spirituality in new ways, perhaps by learning to think of God as a what instead of a who. That statement always reminds me of a conversation I had with a grief counseling client who was struggling with her Christian faith after the death of her young child. She wondered why her loving Father in heaven would allow such a terrible thing to happen. When I suggested that it might help to think of God differently, maybe as an it instead of a who, she became angry and told me God would punish me for calling him an it. Perhaps the problem is simply about semantics. If we remove original sin from the equation, a Christian's definition of salvation might be similar to a Buddhist definition of transcendence. Either way, the goal is to elevate our understanding of what we are and our relationship to the unseen cosmic forces around us. The need for salvation implies that something's wrong, that we are not where we should be, and we need to be rescued. The common Christian understanding is that we are in this condition because of original sin. If we remove original sin from the mix when trying to understand what salvation actually means, we are left with the awareness that sin may simply refer to our sense of separation from the divine. And as such, it is something we can heal from within. Spong reminds us that Buddhists do not attribute their experience of transcendence to a supernatural deity. It is understood that the state of transcendence is natural for humanity because of our innate divinity, and there is no need for the intercession of a third party or an anthropomorphized God. Spong cites these words from his personal teacher, Paul Tillich. We must abandon the external height images in which the theistic God has historically been perceived and replace them with internal depth images of a deity who is not apart from us, but who is the very core and ground of all that is. Maybe if we internalize this image of the divine, then we can respond with an understanding of our bodies as a physical thing when the teen questions a God that would let cancer happen. We could be a friend to the transgender man looking for a faith community instead of an obstacle that requires a standard that we don't even have to live by. Free will could mean just that. Autonomy over our bodies and our lives. We could listen to a Grammy Award-winning vocal group that believes music can build common language that allows people with different views and perspectives to come together without concerning ourselves with who they love. Surviving a car crash could be met with gratitude for the first responders and medical community that facilitated recovery, and not due to a God that picked this one over that one. Maybe we could even let our thoughts and prayers take us from inaction to action as we see that the divine in us is also the divine in others. Maybe when we meet each other at the corner of happy and harmful, we'll be there replacing one of those street signs. Thanks be to God for that. Will you join us for our closing hymn? Number 323, Break Not the Circle.
We extinguish this flame, but not the meaning in our hearts. Our time together has come to an end. Go in peace, be in service to one another, and may you move through the world of love for all of your days.
Make strong in our hearts what unites us. Build bridges across all that divides us. United, make us rejoice in our diversity and at one in our witness to peace.